I would like to pay my respects to the traditional custodians of this land, the Wurundjeri people, as we gather here today to share inspiration, create light, and build in the spirit of oneness and wholeness as was done for centuries before us. I would like to also give my deepest thanks and acknowledgement to everyone that made this event possible. Okay. Assalamu alaikum. Peace and blessings upon you all. When I originally sat down to write my talk, I was a little stumped as to what idea I would share with you this evening. Though I am often described as a poet, I much rather think of myself as a storyteller. I've been blessed with the opportunity of traveling and sharing my stories with people of many colors, creeds, and from all walks of life. I've also had the opportunity of creating story and community through collaborative and learning processes as a facilitator of writing and performance workshops. Writing for me has always been a journey of seeking and understanding, a medium to understand myself and those around me. The more opportunities I am given to do so, the more committed and affirmed I become in my belief of the oneness of the human story. Which brings me to my idea. I wrote a poem almost a year ago that was inspired by my 12-year-old sister. It was a poem concerned with the concept of growing up as a minority within a mainstream society, and it's a poem called Brown-Eyed Child. And it goes a little something like this. This poem is for the brown-eyed, dark-skinned, braided hair child. For the pigtail girls with black braids that crown their sun-kissed temples, still wishing for golden locks as long as Rapunzel's. What a gift you've been blessed with, child. What a gift to spend hours at your mother's knees, her fingertips weaving and cross-stitching your hair with the stories her foremothers used to share. Each passionate tale, each intricate braid shaping your way. Treasure her thoughts, child, for in her eyes and at her feet you will find your throne. These lines are for you, brown-eyed, dark-skinned, braided hair child. And so on and so forth. Thank you. When I wrote this poem, it was with the intention of affirming children that looked like my sister, children who often grow up without having their reflections ever mirrored back to them. But here was the catch. I don't always tell my stories to people that look like me. So I made a conscious decision to perform this poem, even though I was a little doubtful that people could relate to the struggles of an African baby girl trying to find her identity and her way in the world. On the first night I performed this piece, a woman approached me clearly moved. She acknowledged the fact that though she was blonde-haired and blue-eyed, she knew of the struggles of trying to fit in. She joked that she was a little envious of her schoolmates who had curlier hair. It was at that point that I began considering that possibly, just maybe, in unveiling our differences, we find that we are naked before a mirror of similarities. But it wasn't until I was on the road touring that this concept became something a little more tangible for me. Irrespective of which town, city, school, or stage I performed at, the concept of the human oneness, the one human story, kept hitting me in the face time and time again. Why was it that in telling a story of occupation in Palestine, a woman moved to tears stands up and shares with me and the audience that very poem reminded her of her own parents, Holocaust survivors from Poland? Why, how is it that in telling the story of a war that I have only heard about but never actually experienced, that a survivor of that very mess of horror and inspiration can find healing in that remembrance? How can we, as listeners, find integrity in a story that is not our own? My belief is that there is room for us all in every single story. You and I can play active roles regardless of ownership if we give ourselves and each other the permission to be the ear, the mouth, the heart, the victim, the offender, the healer in every story. Whether or not we choose to acknowledge the fact we as people live in each other's stories. We all know that universal truths are self-evident, but I would wager that we as people are nothing but a collection of experiences trapped in bodies diagnosed with the amnesia of living. I have found that stories are our reintroductions to one another. They are residues of past livings and learnings and growings and healings and of lovings. Therefore, we are all responsible for the safekeeping and preservation of all stories. We must become active members invested in creating spaces of connection, of oneness, of wholeness, of goodness. We must be open and willing to find ourselves in one another. We cannot afford to be passive or indifferent any longer. And in the words of the great mystic and poet Rumi, outside ideas of right doing and wrongdoing, there is a field. I will meet you there. Thank you.